So we are talking about the new horror film, The Doll. Now this one marks the on-screen feature film debut of one Valeria Lukyanova. Now she is better known through Western audiences as the Human Barbie. Basically she is an internet sensation of a lady, I think she's from the Ukraine, who basically has modelled herself after Barbie dolls basically, and she kind of looks pretty much just like one. And what do you know, she's in the film called The Doll. Talk about a lucky break, eh? Anyway, now this one is directed by Susannah O'Brien, who previously directed the horror film Encounter, which I actually did a review for on this channel. And you've also got in this film Mindy Robinson, who is probably best known for King of the Nerds as Pom Pom Kitty. You've got Ron Jeremy, Anthony De Negro, Don Schreiber, Isabella Reiko, and Christopher Lenk. Now, the best way I would describe this film is an evil satanic version of Weird Science. It's the best way I would put this film. Basically, the story here is you have these two guys, and one of them is this more of a sensitive type, and he's got this mate, basically his friend, who's a bit more of a kind of a bit of a ladies' man, a bit of a jock. Anyway, these are kind of sharing a house together, and basically the sensitive guy called Andy, basically he's got this girlfriend, but him living with this other guy who's a bit of a party animal is putting pressure on their relationship, and they inevitably break up. And one of the things I did like was having that kind of a situation between a kind of a friendship group where this Andy character is caught between his best friend and his girlfriend, and that kind of pressure that you're kind of getting pulled by two different sides. And I can totally relate to it, because I'm normally the friend that the girlfriends don't like, so I'm on that side of it. I'm normally the get rid of your mate's a pain in the arse, you should not see him anymore or whatever, he's a bad influence. That's normally me, so I totally see it from the character of Chris's point of view, who is the mate basically. But anyway, and I thought it was played very well. I think it was well acted, and kind of it does seem quite genuine, the reasons for the breakup and the reasons that these guys are friends, and they seem quite natural together. So that I all liked. And anyway, they come to the idea that it might be a way to get the girlfriend back, to try and make her jealous. So they decide to hire this professional, shall we say, this professional escort from this site called The Doll. Now, unbeknownst to them, this particular website has some sinister plans, and The Doll is actually played by Valeria, and she has some hidden secrets, shall we say, and it has a somewhat of a sinister motive. We kind of get some backstory, but essentially, not to put too fine of a point of it, it's a Frankensteinish kind of backstory. She's got basically this doctor who seems to be doing experiments using both magic and science to kind of create this kind of the perfect woman and stuff like that, but he needs bits, shall we say. Anyway, and as you can probably imagine, things go from bad to worse as people obviously start dropping off. It's quite a gory film. There's a reasonable amount of gore in places, a bigger body count than I was expecting, and that's all I'll say on the plot. Basically, I don't want to spoil anything further than that. So what did I like about this movie? First of all, like I've said, I liked the relationship between the three kind of hero characters. The other thing I thought was very bold by the filmmaker to do was to have a slasher, and it is essentially a slasher film at the end of the day. But you've seen, obviously, slasher films, you've seen Michael Myers, you've seen Jason Voorhees, all of those people, all these kind of like slashers, they're all mainly big guys that look scary and masks and all that sort of stuff. But why not have a slasher that is a pretty girl? I mean, it's a different kind of way of doing it. I mean, you've had femme fatales before, and that kind of thing, but not really a slasher. I do recall a film called The Blood Widow, which had a female slasher, but she had like a scary mask and stuff on. So it's an interesting kind of dichotomy to have this on the surface of it. Someone who looks kind of, you know, very kind of jolly bird, and kind of you would think she was just kind of this diminutive creature, but obviously at the heart of it she has supernatural power and is basically the incarnation of evil, basically. So it's an interesting kind of a flip that you may kind of have not ever seen before. I don't recall ever seeing a situation quite like this, so it's original in that regards. I've mentioned obviously there's a fair amount of gore here. The body count is a little higher than I thought it probably would be, actually. There's some kind of fun cameos from a couple of kind of recognisable faces that you'll have here. And, you know, it moves along a fair old pace. And there are a couple of decent jump scares here. There are a few kind of creepy moments and a kind of, like, good use of sound effects and stuff like that to create a fun atmosphere. Do I have any negatives of it? There was one scene in particular where someone is hiding that didn't quite work for me. And I will point out at this point, the version of the film I saw isn't necessarily the finished version. I was actually lucky enough to see this as a kind of a test screen. So there may still be some changes that will maybe address some of the issues that I have with it. But basically, there's a scene where a character is hiding, and there's a couple of things that happen within that scene that didn't quite make sense to me. It felt a little bit jumbled. So that particular scene doesn't quite work for me, and kind of left me scratching my head a bit. And it does one of the other things that I would say is, well, it does a typical kind of thing that a lot of slasher films do, and that is when we have our victims get killed, the bodies seem to have no trace. There's no blood or anything like that. There's no kind of evidence that anyone was killed. And this happens so often in slasher films, and I always can't help but think, you've got once they've killed the person, they've got their marigolds on, they stick the rubber gloves on, they get the bleach out, and they're scrubbing away on the floor basically to clean up all the blood, because that's what must happen. So this basically does that as well, and that's pretty much a criticism of most slasher films, I would say, to be fair, but it's certainly true of this one. And the other thing I would say is that Andy's character, who was the kind of the sensitive guy, I didn't quite like him at first, because he is quite the sensitive type, a little bit of a wimp, but he grew on me throughout the film, and I felt his relationship and his interactions were quite genuine. So by the end of the movie, I was kind of you know, I was quite into his character, basically. I kind of quite liked him. So overall, I enjoyed this film. I thought it was, you know, quite well paced. It has a kind of, you know, a good sense of pace, where the tension is kind of building throughout the film, basically. You know, there's a good amount of kills, there's a good amount of gore in it. There are some creepy moments, there's some jump scares. So it pretty much ticks most of the boxes, I would feel, if you are an independent, you know, a fan of independent horror, basically. I think pretty much it will scratch almost everyone's itch here. A couple of kind of issues, story-wise, like I said, that kind of bothered me a little bit. Now, in regards to Valeria herself, which I feel will be the main draw for some people, now, I wasn't particularly familiar with her prior to this, I'll be honest, and she is not an actress by trade, but obviously that's maybe something she's going into, and she does give a kind of strangely otherworldly performance, because she basically plays it like a kind of like an inhuman person almost. She does have a few lines in it as well. I don't believe her primary language is English. I don't actually think she can speak it, to be honest, but she does have a couple of lines here, so you will hear her speak. But she's quite fun, and I have to say, okay, so I will echo it again. I liked the kind of the twist in the genre. I liked having a serial killer, a slasher, basically looks completely different from any type of slasher that you've seen before. 8 out of 10 for me. When you do see it, or do you want to see it, leave me a comment, and I'll look forward to seeing you next time. Bye for now.